welcome back to the channel. I'm Spellsinger. I'm going to continue my review of the fighting fantasy books, game books through the Greenspine series. And if you've been watching the other videos, you'll notice that I'm going to keep to the same kind of structure. So we'll look at the title and book number of this one. We'll take a look and read the blurb off the back of my copy. We'll go through the plot so you can get an idea of what's happening. Take a look at the game mechanics and the adventure sheet. We'll have a look at the artwork and then go through some likes and dislikes for this book, personal likes and dislikes, and touch on some fun facts, if I can think of any, and finish on a summary and score for this entry. And maybe a shout out at the end for some YouTuber that's quite relevant for this one. So yeah. So let's crack on. So this book is title number 5. It's The City of Thieves, very popular and a big fan favourite with those that are obsessed with these books. We have author Ian Livingstone, who's back with another solo effort, and the illustrations this time are Ian McCaig, and they will go on to collaborate a lot throughout this series. In fact, at the time of this recording, we've just had the Dungeon of Blood Island, and the two of them were working on that one as well. So they obviously get on well and they produce very good books together. So long may that last. This is my copy here. So just to give you an idea on the blurb, we have terror stalks the night of Zanbar Bone and his bloodthirsty moondogs hold the prosperous town of Silverton to ransom. You are an adventurer, and the merchants of Silverton turn to you in their hour of need. Your mission takes you to long, dark, twisting streets where thieves, vagabonds, and creatures of the night lie in wait to trap you, unwary traveller. And beyond lies the most fearsome adventure of them all, the tower stronghold of the infamous Zanbar Bones. So if you've gathered, Zanbar Bones is the villain in this entry. So to give you an idea about the plot on City of Thieves, it's basically set in an urban environment, which is the first time. So we've had obviously the dungeons, the castles, we've had the sci-fi, but this time we've come away from the dungeons and forests and we're gone into an urban environment, which is the City of Thieves, otherwise known as Port Blacksand. Now, Livingstone is infamous for his love of the treasure hunt, and you'll get that from a lot of his books. It's a formula that he loves, that with the one true path that is quite well associated to a lot of his books. So now, typically with these type of books, failure to locate specific items will condemn you to death, basically, and it's no different in this entry. There is plenty of enjoyment to be found, though. So basically, within Port Blacksand, you have all the streets to stalk. You search for items and information and clues while attempting not to fall foul of any unsavoury characters. But to give you an understanding of the story, the adventure starts out, as mentioned, in the town of Silverton, which is just outside Port Blacksand. And you'll be asked to locate this wizard Nicodemus to help them out of a sticky situation that they found themselves in. And Nicodemus lives in Port Blacksand. And you can basically find him, and if you can find him, he can help you to defeat the Night Prince, which is Zanbar Bone. And it's up to you to go to the city, find Nicodemus, and find out what he can do to help you, and then go from there to his tower and win the day. The adventure starts out, and you'll very quickly find yourself in the City of Thieves, and it does contain a lot of very memorable characters, and you'll regularly find yourself in all sorts of situations and getting into all kinds of trouble. But it quickly escalates to finding these 3 or 4 very essential items that you cannot finish the book without, basically. Once you do find Nicodemus, the focus very quickly shifts over to those specific items that you need to defeat Zanbar Bone. And you'll eventually leave the city and actually progress to his tower. Zanbar Bone is ultimately, for me, slightly understated as an adversary, and the final encounter with him is relatively straightforward. Maybe could have been a bit fleshed out, but overall, it's a really strong entry. And you will come back to this time and time again. The whole city is very well described. With Ian McCaig's artwork, you just feel immersed in this environment. And like I say, it's slightly open world at the beginning of the book, and you'll make your way through the city, and there'll be a choke point where you find Nicodemus, and at which point it'll be very clear what you need to do to find the secret items that you need to defeat this villain. And then it's just a case, that's basically the halfway point through the book. You leave the city and then you head to the tower. And that pretty much is the plot. It's pretty straightforward, but it really works very well. Let's have a look at the game mechanics and the adventure sheet on this one. The game mechanics aren't wholly different. I think once Ian found his formula, he kind of stuck to it. The reliance on locating the essential items can cause a bit of grief to some if you're not too interested in the shopping trip. I think the shopping trip is where where Ian got the stigma, was probably from this book actually, his love of items. But yeah, the ongoing hunt for them can become the dominating element in this story, which kind of takes you away from some of the fun of the adventure, but I don't mind it myself. The encounters are easily resolved with the usual system for a battle, that mechanic, so that works fine. And it keeps the flow of the story going really nicely. There's many instances of bad luck, maybe unfairly inflicted upon you as the player, maybe through uninformed choices occasionally, but all in all, it stands up really well. Now, the adventure sheet, you'll recognise to be the standard one that was in Warlock, so no actual change there. You still have your skill, stamina, luck scores, and your equipment, which will be very quickly filled up with all the items that you need to find. And obviously you've got your gold, jewels, and potions as well. Moving over to the artwork. Now, the Green Spine series were always well presented books, in my opinion, with very attractive covers and really nice interior artwork. And once the early highlights of this illustrator, Ian McCaig, showed up in this book, he really took the bull by the horns. And as I mentioned earlier, there are lots of collaboration with later books. But Ian McCaig did a splendid job with his artwork in this. You really do get a feel from his imagery of what this ruined city is actually like. He's produced some of the most iconic artwork that I can think of. He's right up there with Russ Nicholson, but has a different style to Russ Nicholson. With this century, Ian McCaig really adds a significant kind of flair, visual flair, which really helps the interest of the book. And Port Black Sand, with Ian McCaig's interpretation, just depicts a real decrepit kind of city, all falling apart, with overhanging buildings, and lots of suspicious people and unsavoury types of characters everywhere behind doors and windows. And as you read through it, you will see this kind of imagery play throughout the video, so you can get an idea of what that looks like. And there's this persistent threat as well of authority, these kind of knighted police almost that wander around the city, and if they catch you without your merchant's pass, you'll be in trouble. There's an inherent kind of danger to the narrow streets as depicted in McCaig's artwork. I've got a favourite actually. I'll put up here. It's these three. At one point, you go to this harbour and you can go across this platform to a pirate ship, and there are these three pirates that are all in their bunks, and it really captures really nicely this particular image about what kind of state they're all in. I mean, they're all boozed up, and you probably notice there's like a little bag of coins there, and they all look pretty much out of it. But I thought this picture really captures some of McCaig's best artwork. Right, so let's take some likes and dislikes. I'm not really keen on the linear path that Ian tends to have in his books, but in this one it kind of works. There's a bit too much guesswork based on bad advice from Nicodemus. I mean, by the time you get to the end of the book, you'll realise that of the three items that he told you to get, you only need 2 of them, but you don't know which 2, so you kind of have to take a guess. Which is, I don't know. Not sure what I think about that, but anyway. Yeah, so again, a general shopping list of items. This isn't as bad as some of his books. Some of his later books that the Scholastic did, I think there's one book where there's about 40 items, of which 10 are used and the other 30 are not mentioned, which is a bit overkill, but this one is not quite as bad as that. Yeah, so Zanbar Bones' tower could have been fleshed out a little more. Maybe had a few more references and maybe explored it a little bit more. It's kind of rushed at the end. But the love I have for this book and the feel it gives you as you read through it surpasses any of those dislikes. So yeah, it's the perfect atmosphere. It has a great, strong narrative, and obviously with McCaig's artwork running through it, it's a real winner, and I can understand why it's so highly thought of by those that read these game books. Fun facts: Ian McCaig he's an American artist, but he's also a writer and filmmaker, and he was involved in the Star Wars franchise and other iconic films and book projects and such. But yeah, if you look at this picture on the cover, the guy, Zanbar Bones, looks very familiar to another character. So, I don't know, it's his concept, so I suppose he can use that however he wants, but there is definitely a striking resemblance there. Anyway, there's your fun fact. You can tell your friends that one. So, just to summarise this one, it's a standard adventuring scenario, and you'll soon find yourself in the city and navigating the streets of Port Blacksand. And the city offers a really enticing environment to explore. However, there are restrictions to the scope of travel and a general lack of background detail in detail to the city to really do it kind of justice. It's very unlikely that you'll finish this book first time. It's pretty tricky, but once you know the path, you can sort of pick through it quite quickly, so it's worth mapping this one. These early fighting fantasy books, I think, tended to sort of favour high difficulty, possibly as a way of extending the book's lifespan. I don't know. Comments on that one if you think that might be reaching, but yeah, I always found that with these early ones, certainly. But yeah. Their technique to extend the book, yeah, potentially, but we'll see. You'll be involved in a lot of side quests in this one, which is always a nice thing inside the city, and most of them are in order to locate these essential items that you need to have before you get to Zanbar's tower. And there's a lot of fun in seeking out kind of every path. I think if I read this book now, I would still find maybe a couple of references that I never found previously. There's a lot of fun in seeking and exploring, but you may tire of this effort if the ultimate conclusion has already been achieved and you're just reading through it again. But like I say, it's nice to sort of flesh out the whole book sometimes. I truly feel like when you read this book, you really are in the city. So like I say, great atmosphere, very there's a lot of characters that you can get a lot of interaction with, and the artwork again just shows the city in its kind of true state. Port Blacksand is almost like the star of the book and almost a character in its own right. This is, like I say, classic fighting fantasy. You're a sword for hire. You know about this evil that needs to be thwarted. There's lots of items and conditions to be discovered if you want to win, and so you crack off on your journey. So it's classic fighting fantasy, and potentially what Sir Ian does best. He really does create a vibrant, living city for you to explore, and it's almost legendary because this city will show up in numerous other books in the series, and not just Ian's work either. When we get onto the other authors that show up to help out with this series, you will often be either in or hear of Port Blacksand. There's whole books devoted to it as well later on, so we'll get to those eventually. So it's become a bit of a legend. I think, all said, I would have to give this book a score of 8 out of 10 because it really is a cracking book. I mean, it's highly replayable, and you're going to have a lot of fun going through it first time, second time, 100th time. It really does have good lastability, this one. It's definitely a strong entry, and I would recommend it, even if you are a hardy or you're no stranger to the Fighting Fantasy series. I would recommend this one as perhaps one of Ian's greatest. There is, if I give a shout out, I was going to mention there's a couple of guys that are on Twitch and YouTube. They're called Mod Extra, and they have a really unique way of playing these games. So it's split screen on Twitch, and you basically have one reading the adventure, one making the decisions, and it's all virtual dice, and they have quite a relaxed take on the rules, but they're a lot of fun to watch, and I would recommend their channel if you are interested, or you just want to have a look around and see what other people are doing. They are worth looking up. Mod Extra. So I think that pretty much wraps up this entry. I think I pretty much said everything I was going to say about this one. So if you like this and you found it interesting, then maybe give it a thumbs up, and maybe a comment if you think of things that you might want me to cover in the future books, or if you agree or disagree with anything I said, just chuck it in the comments. It's always good to get thoughts from you guys, and if you really liked it, then maybe think about subscribing to the channel, and I'll have a look at the next book, which is going to be another classic by Ian Livingstone again, which is Death Trap Dungeon, considered to be the greatest of the Green Spine series. So we'll have a look at that one next, but in the meantime, thank you so much, and I'll catch you soon.